So it's not a one-time thing. It's about constantly learning and staying informed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us to another important point, holding those responsible accountable.
Right. We talked about the potential legal consequences, but beyond that, is there a role for everyday people to play in making sure justice is served?
Absolutely. Reporting any suspicious activity to the authorities is so important. It can prevent other people from becoming victims, and it helps to strengthen the whole financial system. Think of it as a civic duty.
So if you see something, say something.
Exactly. We all have a role to play in fighting financial fraud.
That's a great point. Now let's bring it back to the 79th group. What's next for insolvency and law in terms of this case? What are your next steps?
Right now, our focus is on continuing our investigations, gathering as much information as we can to build a strong case. We're also working closely with the investors who've been affected, providing guidance and support as they go through this process.
And you're still encouraging anyone who might have been impacted to reach out to you.
Absolutely. We're here to help in any way we can, whether it's providing information, exploring legal options, or just lending an ear. We want to support those who have been affected by this.
Okay, that's fantastic. And we'll be sure to include your contact information again in the show notes so listeners can easily get in touch. But before we wrap things up, I want to touch on something you mentioned before, financial literacy. It's so crucial, yet it's often overlooked.
I completely agree. We need to give people the knowledge and skills they need to make smart financial decisions and protect themselves from these schemes.
So where can people go to learn more? What kind of resources are out there for those who want to boost their financial literacy?
Oh, there are tons of great resources, both online and offline. The Financial Conduct Authority's website is a great place to start. They have a bunch of educational materials on investing scams, consumer rights.
That's a great resource. And there are also a lot of really good books and podcasts that explain complicated financial concepts in a way that's easy to understand.
Yes, The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham is a classic for a reason. And for podcasts, I always recommend Planet Money. They do a great job of making economics fun and engaging.
Those are great suggestions, and I think it's important to say again that financial literacy isn't just for experienced investors, it's for everyone.
Definitely. Whether you're just starting out or you've been investing for years, there's always more to learn. And the more informed you are, the better protected you'll be.
Well said. I think that's a perfect transition point. But before we get to our final thoughts on this case, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back to explore the wider implications of the 79th group situation and leave our listeners with some thought-provoking insights. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into this whole 79th group situation. It's been a lot to process: red flags, enablers, due diligence, financial literacy. But before we let you go, I want to get your expert take on what's the one big takeaway you really want our listeners to remember from all of this.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
There's so much to think about here, but if I had to boil it down to just one core idea, it would be trust but verify.
Trust but verify. I like that.
Don't just let your guard down because something looks legit or because it's coming from someone you trust. Always take that extra step, do your own research, ask the hard questions, and be willing to walk away if something feels off.
Trust but verify. It's so simple but so powerful. And honestly, it goes way beyond just investing, right?
Absolutely. It's a good way to approach life in general, whether you're talking about business partnerships or checking out a politician's claims or even just picking someone to do work on your house. That idea of trust, but verify it, can really save you a lot of trouble in the long run.
It's about being smart, not being suspicious.
Right?
Having a good balance of trust, but also using your critical thinking skills.
Exactly. And when it comes to investments, that critical thinking has to include understanding that there's always some risk involved. Nothing is completely risk-free. But by doing your homework and getting advice from professionals, you can make choices that fit your comfort level and your financial goals.
So it's about taking charge of your financial future, not just letting things happen, but making informed decisions.
Well said. And I think this whole 79th group situation is a really good example of how financial fraud can happen anywhere to anyone.
Yeah, it's not just about those huge scandals you see in the news.
Right. It can happen on a smaller scale, too, within communities, even with people.
It's like it often hides in plain sight, using trust and familiarity to its advantage.
Exactly. So we all need to be aware. We have to learn about the different ways financial fraud can happen so we can spot it and report it.
And if anyone out there needs help or advice or even just someone to talk to about what they've gone through, Insolvency and Law is there for them.
We are. We're dedicated to protecting the rights of investors and holding those responsible for financial misconduct accountable.
That's great to hear. And we'll make sure to include your contact information in the show notes so listeners can easily get in touch. So, to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of financial fraud. Remember, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and as always, stay curious.